Okay.
Just be prepared, and I'll give you a knock once we're like totally on.
Okay. Sounds good. So we're gonna get going live just in a little bit right now.
Yeah.
Oh, in a minute.
Did you see that Selena Gomez video?
Yes, I did.
You're good now. So.
Yeah. Okay.
You
did. Shh. Oh. Shad.
All good? Okay. Okay, so welcome back, everyone, to another 180 Shift podcast. My name is Ellie.
And I'm Tara.
And we're here back in studio after a little bit, but we have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of cool things. But right now we actually have a guest that we met actually in Washington, D.C. Yes. So it was a productive time. It was really cool. But we're so happy to be back with our guest, Greg. Now, Greg, would you like to just, I guess, start off by sort of going over who you are, and then we'll kind of jump into this whole entire conversation today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a thrill to be here. So my name is Greg Streiff. I'm the CEO and founder of a business called ESGx. We're an all things ESG platform. So we help businesses with vendor selection, implementation strategies, and really we're connecting buyers and sellers of ESG solutions and trying to bring to market something that really doesn't exist today, but is solving what we call the ESG implementation gap. I can go into tell you more about my background leading up to this. Let me know.
Yeah, totally. Do we want to start the boba tradition that we have?
Yes.
Yes. Our boba. I know. We did. We were able to. Were you able to get the boba?
I did. Yeah, I'm excited to drink it.
He got boba?
Been a struggle.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
We got it to Greg, who, by the way, is in New York. So
oh my goodness,
it's like a really
incredible.
Cool thing. Yeah.
Did you stab it? You gotta stab it.
Such a cool studio, though, that I'm kind of jealous I'm not there.
You're welcome here.
Yeah. Any time over here would be great. But yeah, we got our boba.
So, wow, that's bomb.
Amazing.
That's bomb.
So,
was it good?
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, I like most boba, so. Yeah.
I hope your boba's good.
What kind did you get?
I got a potted plant, which is it has like Oreo on the top usually, and like a mint leaf, and it's like a regular milk tea.
That's pretty cool. How you like it, Greg?
Hopefully it's good.
Can't beat boba.
Yeah. Do you like boba?
I love it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we have some guests who are just like, I'll just drink it for the camera, but I don't know.
Yeah, like they won't finish it.
Yeah, but it's okay. We love all of our guests, even if they don't like boba, but that's okay. Yeah. Well, Greg, I mean, I guess we can just tell us a little bit about who you are, your background. Maybe tell us, did you always want to go into becoming, like, I guess, a CEO of a business? Was this always like your life ambition as a young child, or what was your little self's dream growing up?
It's a great question. Honestly, I don't know the answer. I think I'm generally like a little bit more of a risk taker. I think I've always been a risk taker. I think I've always been an independent thinker.
Yeah.
And I like challenges. I thrive in uncertainty. I thrive in sort of environments for which it feels as though I'm the underdog, if that makes any sense, where I can find unique ways to bring value and excel. Beat people. I think I'm very competitive, and I think I've been that way my entire life. And and so I don't know if I've ever been like, I want to start a company. But I think that like intuitively, like I feel like it's always been a place that I've sort of known, just intuitively that I'd probably end up. But also felt that I needed to check certain like let's call it like corporate ladder boxes in order to get to a point where I felt that I had the confidence and sort of the resources and just the knowledge and the vision that I have today. So I grew up in a large family in New Jersey. I have 7 brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of them, and was very much into normal things growing up, but certainly the arts. And when I went to college, I think initially was thinking that I would study something related to the arts. And then I went to Washington University in St. Louis for undergrad, and they forced you to take a lot of humanities courses. And it really opened my eyes up to kind of just a different way of thinking, really economics, reading a lot of the great philosophers and, introduction to social thought and the evolution of social thought. And I just thought it was fascinating. And then when I learned that, oh, if I go this direction and I get an economics degree or I go into the B school, I can come out and I can go into investment banking and I can make all this money. And so I thought, well, why not? It's very structured. I've always enjoyed I like things that are like math problems, that have like a beginning, a middle, and an end that you can solve. And so banking really appealed to me. Investment banking really appealed to me because it is this thing that, if you go in and you work hard, you know exactly, and you're smart enough, right? You know exactly, you put what you're going to get out of what you put in. So, there's a banking program where it's like you spend 3 years as an analyst, you spend 2 years as an associate, you spend 3 years as a director, right? You know exactly how it's going to flow. And it's really on you to make that and bring that to life. Right. And it requires a ton of work. And I'm no stranger to hard work. I've always worked very hard my entire life. And so I was like, I'll go in and just work really hard and I'll become an investment banker for the rest of my life and make a bunch of money and, sail off into the sunset.
Sail off into the sunset. That's fun. Yeah, I know. I think some jobs really appeal to people because you're like, yeah, you'll make some money off of that.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question. So for those of us who don't know, what is ESG?
Great question. So ESG is like essentially the math behind how you become if you're a company, it's like, we have to do sustainability. We have to become sustainable. And it's like, well, how do we become sustainable? What does that mean? And it's essentially the math behind how you bring that to life, how you become sustainable. So it's a framework that you essentially can leverage to determine where your business sits in terms of what's important from a sustainability standpoint. So basically ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Yeah. And so I think about it as there's 3 topics when you think about sustainability that fall in these 3 categories. So there's environmental stuff, which can be anything related to energy, renewable energy, fossil usage, can be related to waste infrastructure, are you recycling? Are you sending stuff to landfills? Are you incinerating? Are you finding ways within your organization to reduce the amount of essentially trash that you create, right? And how do you do that? You can educate your workforce. You can also look if you're manufacturing products. How are you manufacturing those products? What are the inputs to that process? And how can you maybe change some of those inputs or the process itself to eliminate waste in general, but also to ensure that the products that you're creating are themselves more recyclable, more sustainable, compostable, and then also in the back end of that process that you don't have waste itself that would go somewhere. If you do have waste, it's waste that you can recycle or waste that you can do things with that can be reused. And so there's a lot under the environmental side, and that's really where people spend most of their time these days and in general. And it's the thing that kind of gets a lot of press because it's easy to quantify, it's easy to track, it's easy to go to a business that's emitting a lot of carbon and say, we know exactly how much carbon you're emitting, we know exactly how much power you're using, and you're not doing anything about it. Or you are doing something about it, and we can by installing a solar plant, solar system, or putting in sort of a smart HVAC system. There's a lot of different levers you can pull to reduce your carbon footprint, and it's easy to track that stuff. So it's the most quantifiable, and also it's the thing that the environmental stuff is the thing that people are starting to have to report on. So there's regulatory frameworks that have existed in Europe, particularly in the UK, that have mandated businesses that are publicly traded in London Stock Exchange to actually release what their emissions are and how much, carbon and so on and so forth, that they're releasing into the environment. And that same type of legislation is now sitting with, in the legislation here in the United States and with the SEC. and has in some cases been adopted, and that's something that's going to start to be imposed on businesses that are publicly traded in the U.S. as well. So that's environmental. We can dig more into that, but that's environmental. Social is stuff that's like, are you creating a safe work environment? Do you have, oh, and by the way, under environmental, you also have like air quality, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
like, right, stuff like that. And then social is like, are you, do you have mothering pods do you have enough mothering pods, lactation suites within your manufacturing facility to accommodate the number of women that would work there and the number of people that work there? And then on the governance side, it's really about, it's like, I think when I think of ESG, I actually think about it more as like GSE, because like if you're going to do something on the environmental side or on the social side, like you have to have a plan before you do it. Like you don't just say, hey, one day I'm going to go do a solar project. I'm going to spend all this money. I'm going to put a solar system in and it's going to be great. Like you have to have a plan and you have to know why you're doing that. And you have to understand what essentially the business case is behind that decision, as well as like, let's call it the ESG case, the ESG ROI and the financial ROI. And so in order to get to that and make sure that that's worth your time, you first have to go kind of lead with governance. And what does that mean? So governance is essentially, what are the frameworks that you have in place within your own organization to identify opportunities that are ESG or sustainability related? How are you reporting on those? How are you like generally to the public, but also how are you managing those internally, establishing KPIs, strategies, projects, and ensuring that the process by which those things get completed and implemented is well constructed and doesn't pose any business continuity risk and is sort of the best place to start and to do things. And the governance side is also reporting. It's also it also has to do with like things like your board. Like, do you have a diverse board? Like, do you have a responsible investment policy? So when you deploy capital into things, like, are you ensuring that like that capital is being used to go into a business or an opportunity that like meets certain requirements? Like that business itself, the health of the business itself that you are doing business with, does it meet certain requirements? So it's just like the governance side is just essentially like, it's just like good practice within an organization that sort of sets up the rules and also the frameworks by which you're going to do a bunch of other things within your organization. And that in of itself is essentially an ESG topic. I think this is like, I hope this isn't like too confusing. It's kind of, the thing with ESG is that it's like, it's a complicated thing. And it's very much like the Wild West right now. Like people are trying to make sense of like, what is ESG?
Right.
And how does it apply to my organization? Who do I work with? Who do I trust? What do I do? And that's really where we come in, like my business and sort of the genesis of starting it is like seeing that void in the market and coming in and being like, we have the solution. And we can talk more about that, but that's I'll pause there because that was a lot, but
No, that's great. Thank you.
That's really good. I think like I can definitely tell it's a very complicated subject, but I think that you were able to explain it at least so we could have like a basic general knowledge of it. So that's really good. And you know what?
I am. Oh yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
We're just like, who's gonna go? Do you want me to go?
Well, I just have a quick question. So, what are some examples of some businesses that you have worked with in the realms of ESG?
Yeah, so the businesses that I've worked with, so I'll say, some of the businesses I've worked with in ESG is, so our clients, we have like buy side and sell side. So we have essentially this marketplace that we've created where we're connecting buyers and sellers. And so when I first started the company, we were going after one-off businesses. So we were saying, all right, this business, like, they're in manufacturing, they're publicly traded, they have like a bunch of facilities and markets that have like really high power prices. They're selling to larger players that have like really heavy ESG goals. So they're going to need to comply in order to continue to sell to those folks. So we would go after these sort of one-off businesses that check these boxes that we knew had the highest likelihood and urgency to convert to certain products and solutions that we were selling. And that wasn't like super cost effective to do it that way. And so we sort of shifted the business model. And then we went to private equity funds and we started working with private equity funds because private equity funds own portfolios of companies. And so we thought, all right, well, if we go and work with a private equity fund, we'll get them as a client. And then hopefully we'll get all of the businesses they own as clients as well. And we'll be able to provide this sort of wholesale governance solution that applies not just at the financial sponsor level, but at the portfolio company levels as well. And there's a lot to unpack there, so I'll just leave it at that for now. So we work with some big name folks. We work with, and I think it's really a testament to the fact that what we're doing is like filling a very unique need in the market and perhaps the most critical need in the market today, which again is like focused on implementation. Like how do you tie a business case to something that's fairly esoteric or doesn't traditionally have a business case, which is sustainability, right? So we're working with like Denham Capital, which is a large private equity fund with about 40 billion in assets under management. We're working with companies like Platinum Equity, which is even larger than Denham Capital. Platinum Equity is a diversified buyout fund based in North America with a focus in North America. We work primarily with diversified buyout funds that are focused on middle market acquiring and operating, and then ultimately selling middle market businesses. So when you think about a diversified private equity fund that fits that that profile, they're going to have an allocation of how they deploy capital. So they may raise a fund of $15 billion, and like there's going to be an allocation when they raise that fund where there's going to be like 35% of all the businesses we're going to buy are going to be manufacturing, 10% are going to be pharmaceuticals, you know. So on and so forth. So they'll have an allocation. So we kind of typically know what the allocation is of the businesses that they own are within the diversified buyout kind of fund space, which is another reason why we focus on that. So we're working with Denham Capital, working with a company called Platinum Equity, sharp elbow, turnaround shop. They're awesome, super smart, super forward looking with ESG. And we love working with them, and we're really impressed with their team. We're impressed with all the teams that we work with. We also work with a company called ESGx Capital. They have about 500 portfolio companies. We're excited to be partnered with them, as well as we've worked with Blackstone. We've worked with Goldman Sachs, who is an investment bank but has their own prop desk. They do invest in real estate and companies as well, so we're working through the real estate arm. We also work with large investment banks. So we work with TD Bank, we've worked with UBS, as well as others. You know, a lot of these investment banks, they have clients, and their clients, you know, historically investment banks have advised their clients, right? Large publicly traded companies or mid-sized businesses, really businesses of any size, on their capital structure and essentially only financial related things. But as the world has evolved and sustainability is such a hot topic, and a way to sort of track capital to your own business has become part of the conversation. So a lot of these investment banks are really hungry, the same way that everyone's hungry for solutions. The investment banks as well, the investment bankers are hungry for two things. They're hungry themselves for how do we go to our clients and not just advise them on silly things like, hey, you need to hire a consultant to help you with the ESG strategy, but how do we advise them on actual implementation topics? Who do you work with when it comes to E? Who do you work with when it comes to S? And who do you work with G? What are your peers doing? How are they benefiting? So on and so forth. And so what we're able to do is come into an investment bank and help them sort of navigate this really multifarious, fragmented universe of what we call ESG solution providers. So these are companies that have a specific product and solution that has an ESG benefit to it. So that could be solar companies, which is the obvious one, right. But it could also be something like mushroom packaging or seaweed straws, or zero carbon, zero waste, plant-based energy drinks for the break room of manufacturing facilities. All of these things have like an ESG ROI that could be at cost parity with whatever they're already stocking the break room with. So why not buy this cool, innovative product that checks all these other boxes, and you get some ESG points for that, you know? Yeah. So we're working with, on the provider side, we have hundreds of clients that we work with. And I don't know if those names you would know as well, or the listeners would know as well. They run the gamut from regional power companies to, companies across, that are working nationwide, large scale energy as a service businesses, HVAC companies, advanced combustion controls. We work with like carbon accounting platforms. So we have everything, hardware solutions, tech solutions, you name it, we have it. And when you
Wow.
think about ESG and like what constitutes an ESG product, like ESG isn't a new concept, right? It's been around forever. Like it's been around for a long time, not forever, but for a long time. And the products, the products that underpin what ESG is definitely have been around forever, right? So it's essentially about breathing new life into everything that we buy and sell, everything that we use to become more sustainable. So everything will eventually become itself in our mind, in my mind, in my thesis, in the company's thesis, an ESG product or solution. So it's not just going to be about, hey, I'm going to go buy some paper plates. It's going to be like, I'm going to go buy paper plates. What are the cheapest and what are the most sustainable? And wherever those two numbers are the highest, those are the paper plates I'm going to acquire for my business,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think those are like really interesting and really cool things that you've brought up, especially the names that you've worked with. So that's really cool, just a testament to like what you've done.
Absolutely.
But I just wanted to also, I guess, touch in a little bit more on ESG itself. And I wanted to know from your perspective, what are some of the misconceptions of ESG? And then, so we'll just start it with that. What are some of the misconceptions that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think one is like there's like DEI is getting a lot of press.
Right.
Like technically, like DEI does get rolled into the governance side of ESG, but technically, like it's not really ESG. It's a separate topic that actually kind of predates like the explosion of like ESG is like this hot thing, right? I think what's also misunderstood is honestly, like, I don't know if I'm the one that's not misunderstanding, but I think a lot of people, I live in this world and this is all that I do and it's all that I've done for a while now. And I've got to say that I think that it's misunderstood in the sense that people just literally don't understand it and what it is. I think it's been very politicized.
Yeah.
And become a buzzword that people just react to.
What are some, I guess, examples that you've seen how it's become politicized?
Well, I think just you see it's a talking point and it's a buzzword, in both sides, particularly, right? Like on the investing side, ESG doesn't work, we're not going to invest in it anymore, or we're doing away with ESG policies, right? I think there's not a lot of depth to that conversation. When I hear whether it's conservative, like political activists, or really anyone who's just essentially opposed to the concept, it's sort of like, we're just opposed to the concept, like, screw ESG. And because the returns speak for themselves. Go look at the publicly traded companies that have ESG mandates or the ESG funds. They're now all underperforming. So now, BlackRock, you're no longer doing your job. You must get rid of the ESG, right? And I think like, so the misconception, I think, starts and ends there. I don't fully get it. I think that why do I think ESG is misunderstood by, let's say, conservatives, let's say conservative activists? Why do I think it's misunderstood? I think one, because I think it's misunderstood, because I think it actually is misunderstood. But I think two, the reporting side of ESG, and sort of like the distraction that ESG essentially can impose on a business isn't of itself an issue, I think, right? So if that's what they're sort of reacting to, I get it. Like as a business owner, I get it. Like if you have a business and your job is to produce widgets, like that's all that you should be doing is how do I produce these widgets at the lowest cost, at the highest volume? How do I get to know like you're focused, laser focused on that and your customer and what they want. And you don't want distractions, right? And you don't want to be burdened by additional costs in order to bring that, to essentially to survive and to operate. You want to be focused on business continuity. So when you think about ESG, there is a regulatory and a compliance aspect to it that can be a burden on businesses. For example, like in the city of New York, there's a series of local laws that have been introduced, not even introduced, like they're actually enacted, that mandate businesses within certain size ranges to do certain things. So for example, there's like one law, it's called Local Law 97, which mandates businesses over 50,000 square feet to have a carbon reduction policy. They have to reduce the amount of carbon that they emit. All that stuff gets tracked. It's going to be getting tracked starting next year. And there's actual metrics that the city will apply to your utility bill to understand whether or not you're over or under, like what your allowed allotment is for emissions for your particular building. And so there's major fines that will be imposed on these businesses if they don't figure out a way to start decarbonizing ahead of that happening. So now, like, so that's a burden, right? Like another burden is like the Pump Act, right? Like let's talk about another law. What I just talked about was like a local set of laws. That's essentially a cost that's imposed on a business if they don't comply with something that's essentially ESG related. The other thing, actually, I'll give you one other local law. And by the way, there's like 8 large municipality, let's call it cities across the country that are following suit behind New York as kind of the front runner around these types of local laws that are implementing themselves. So, Boston, Chicago, Denver, San Francisco, and others are doing the same. So it's a trend and it'll continue. Another local law would be like if you're over, I don't know, I think it's 25,000 square feet, you have to install LED lighting for 2 reasons. Like there's a bunch of reasons as to why. One is like incandescent lights are not really economical. Like they burn out like the number of times you turn them on and off. The other reason they're not great is they're kind of a more of a fire hazard than LED lighting. And then the other reason is they're not recyclable. They're like just straight trash, and they're not like as great for the environment. The useful life of them is shorter relative to LEDs. And also like the light spectrum, the frequency of light that can be emitted from an incandescent light doesn't sort of mimic or mirror like the same type of light that you can get outside. And there's like actual evidence and research behind sort of the benefits of productivity and just happiness and joy by virtue of having access to better lighting. So there's a mandate in New York City that says if you're over 25,000 square feet and you don't have LED lighting by such and such a date, then you will get fined. That's kind of like awful for businesses, but like for the occupants, right? If you think about New York City, if I'm an occupant and I'm living in a building or I'm going to work in a building, like, yeah, I want LED lights. I want better lighting. I want better air quality. I want, clean and healthier workspace and environment for myself.
Right. Yeah.
So it's almost like this competitive edge that you have to bring to life if you're yourself like a business owner in any way, right? Because customers are demanding this. So sure, there is a disincentive to not doing it, and sure, it's an additional burden, and people should be able to decide by themselves. But I think the market is making those decisions already as it is. So even if you were to get rid of any of the regulatory framework, my point is that ESG is still happening.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
I can definitely see that. I think I've seen that, especially just with the way that our generation's currently heading is definitely towards that. And you know what? I just wanted to know what maybe what your perspective is and how this will sort of reshape how the future for businesses for when we are like old enough, or like the ones who are coming after who are going to start businesses as well. How is this going to reshape the whole entire field?
I think that, so today when you think about, like, you have like what I call like ESG decision makers, like dedicated headcount. You have people that have ESG and or sustainability in their title within a company. So let's call those people the ESG decision makers. Let's not even say of today. Let's say of like last year, like yesterday. What's happening is like there's a decentralization within organizations around ESG decision making because people are getting smarter and sort of like the concepts are being disseminated across the organization. And so everyone will eventually become themselves an ESG decision maker. Everyone within a company, you don't need to have those things in your title to have this sort of like, integrated into like your thought process when you make a corporate decision. So that's one. Two is like, to your point, right? Like, and this is like for your, I don't know if you guys are, you said it yourself, like kind of Gen Z, and there's a whole generation of people that are entering the workforce that have been learned to prioritize and sort of been, by virtue of just being made aware of, the benefits of sustainability, and maybe only the benefits, and coming in and sort of demanding or prioritizing work environments that prioritize their own well-being, right? If I had two options to go work at a business that doesn't have LED lighting, doesn't have good windows, doesn't have any like community programs within the building itself versus a place that has all of those things. I come in, they have big windows, they've got great lighting, it's safe, right? Safety, right? Privacy. These are like ESG topics as well. I know that that this is a safe work environment. There's good key card access. Maybe there's a community program where on my break I can go up on the roof and like pick plant, pick vegetables or something, or participate. This starts to become this like immersive, sort of existence that puts people, like, I think puts smiles on people's faces, makes them want to be there, makes them want to work harder, and makes them feel a part of something. Not even without even getting into like what the actual psychological benefits as a human would be of being around that versus being in a, dark office somewhere. So I know that like those don't really exist anymore. And so I'm kind of contrasting these things in a fairly big way, but I guess you get the point. I guess going forward also, I think with like Trump coming into office and the pullback on, right, like ESG was like super hot over the last few years. And I think that it's just like going underground right now. I think that it's actually hotter than it's ever been. And I think 2025 is going to be the biggest year yet for ESG. And I think there's a lot of evidence of that. And I think that going forward, like budgets are going to continue to increase when it comes to dedicated ESG spending. I think also like when you think about principal capital, private equity, venture capital, like they are all hungry looking for places to deploy capital and invest that are in the ESG space. So I think like the three big movements right now, and I'd be curious to see what you guys think, but I think it's like obviously AI, huge, right?
Right.
Another one is something that you guys are a part of, which is this like decentralization of how information is disseminated. It's like independent podcasters and journalists. People want to get kind of information directly from the source. And they want to get differentiated views. They want to know the good and the bad. So they themselves can form their own view on for their own unique, personalized experience of life, right? And I think the same applies to the corporate setting. I think that within a corporate setting, particularly when it comes to sustainability, people are hungry for information, differentiated views, and they're looking for answers and solutions, and they want to understand the good and the bad. So they themselves can personalize their own journey and make their own decisions on how we're going to bring sustainability to life within our organization. The third thing is sustainability. And I think that, integrating sustainability into the products and solutions that we buy, integrating it into how like a business is done, how capital allocation decisions are made, all this stuff in my mind is here to stay. And I think that everyone will become an ESG decision maker within an organization. And I think like essentially like financial decisions will no longer be purely financial. Like they will be inextricably linked to, ESG impact going forward. So I think businesses within the ESG space that try to sort of capitalize on those three concepts, are going to be the most successful.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing like, I think for some businesses it may be a little bit of a hurt at first, but I think that in time they'll realize that there's a lot of benefits that come with taking those sort of what you may think as like, a risk of buying the more sustainable thing or having those larger windows, which I think will be obviously, since Gen Z is leaning towards that, it'll help them in the future. But Tara, did you have any questions?
Well, yeah, I also... You had asked us kind of what we had thought too about how just the market and everything is changing. And one thing I wanted to add too is like social media, I think starting especially with Vine, remember Vine? And just like, YouTube and all that stuff, it was like, the power kind of went to the people again, and like kind of like that movie Gladiator, or just like the concept of the gladiator is like the people hold the power. And I think we saw that like with the whole social media revolution. And then to see AI on top of that, it's like like if you go to a website like Kling.ai, you will see a bunch of short films made by just people sitting in their bedroom, and they're AI short films. So it's just, I think it's a really interesting time to be, a part of this culture and just to see what's going on, because what we're seeing is a high demand for independent perspectives rather than, the mainstream core, like so that, and then I am seeing also just a lot of kind of rebellion from the mainstream, and also just mainstream media, mainstream like corporate things, So I'm also curious to, and it seems like it's its own version of like we're in this like different like techie Wild West, But I am curious too. What's your perspective to, let's say, like a young entrepreneur who is pursuing, owning a business and does not want to, like, what's your response to someone who does not pursue ESG or incorporate it into their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult if you're just starting a business to even be really thinking about ESG. I mean, I would say that the ESG thing is more relevant certainly for large capital businesses that are publicly traded. And then it's relevant to like kind of the mid cap to a lesser extent, but becoming increasingly more important to those folks. And then in terms of starting your own business, like the last thing you should be thinking about is like, am I ESG compliant? You should be laser focused on your business plan, laser focused on like, do I have the right team? Do I have the right, are these the right people? People invest in teams, and like people are everything. And it's not just enough to have like a great idea. You have to have a vision, a plan. You have to be passionate, and you have to have. You can worry about ESG later.
Yeah.
If anything, if you're too ESG friendly out of the gate, and maybe I shouldn't say this, I think you run the risk of really stifling maybe entrepreneurial creativity. I mean, startups are just chaos. It's organized. Now I'm not even going to say organized chaos. It's chaos.
It's chaos. It's a lot of craziness at first, I'm sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure throughout the business.
Also, another question I have really quickly, and then I'll pass it back off to you, Ellie. But people are incorporating AI into all types of different business models, like just everything, like online businesses to like, marketing businesses to like real estate. Like AI is just like what's your opinion about how people are utilizing AI for all different, genres of business right now?
I think it's still evolving. I mean, I think there's a limit to there's a limit. There's a lot of talk of generative AI and its usefulness, but I think it's still in its infancy. I think they like AI from a front end experience, like chatbots, right? Like when you think about like as a customer interacting with a platform, so like the front end of that, that sort of immediate customer experience, like I think it's kind of like been there, done that, but like back end generative AI is really where there's a lot that is just, it's still early days. For example, like let's say that I wrote a software platform, which we have, and we're building a beautiful software platform. But if I want to automate, complex things behind the scenes and plug into an LLM, there's a limit. Once the data sets, the bedrock of your data, as it gets bigger and bigger, the LLM models that exist today are just not powerful enough to get it right every time. And in fact, most times, even if they get it right, it's slightly wrong. So we've experimented a lot with having, okay, what if I have 3 different LLMs that check one another to ensure that the output is that the customer ultimately sees, or the decision that's made is like triple, quadruple checked. Still doesn't work. There's a lot of room to grow. But I think so. I guess your question. So your question is like, if someone, sorry, like where does AI essentially?
Yeah, like is it wise to be utilizing AI this much for like different types of businesses?
Yeah, and I think like we've tried to use it a lot for what we're doing, but like ESG, there's so many, it's just so complicated. There's many frameworks out there that exist. There's different ways that people categorize businesses and industries and materiality topics and metrics, and it's a lot. And so we've custom built everything so it's linear. But I think like a chat bot for like AI question for like ESG questions is interesting. I think that AI is definitely going to change the way the business is done. I think it's still a little early stage to be able to think, sort of leverage anything that's off the shelf, start your own business with. But maybe some of the stuff that like content creation, it's helpful, like pretty wild, like just the images that you can create. We just posted something today on why we think ESG 2025 is going to be the hottest year yet, and we created an image in Canva using magic that shows an ESG board game. This is choose your own adventure, and it was,
That's cool.
Yeah, it came out. It was like awesome. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen like that show Severance, like the beginning of Severance.
Yeah.
Very like beginning of Severance, like.
Yeah. Well, that's actually kind of like really cool. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree. It's kind of a little early. I mean, we're just barely at the beginning stages of what we're gonna see.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think.
It's moving so quickly.
It is moving
so
quickly,
quick.
but yeah, it's all crazy. But something that I heard a little earlier, what you said is when you started your business, there was sort of a void that you needed to fill. So I wanted to know what sort of started you or prompted you to see that void and want to start this business.
So yeah, it's funny because like when I was an undergrad, I wrote this paper in this like public finance class about, it was kind of like a what if paper. Like what if like the concept of like how do you maximize shareholder value isn't just purely off financial returns. Like what if the market ascribed value to like having an equitable workspace where you have really good healthcare, you know what I mean? Like what if, and so I think that was like kind of like the beginning for me. And then I worked for the city of New York. I worked for the pension fund. Before I worked for a large publicly traded utility called PPL. And when I worked there, I was a senior executive, and I built a direct investing practice for the city of New York to invest directly in marquee power assets and other types of infrastructure assets around the greater New York City area. And so we invested in big cogeneration facilities. We invested in LaGuardia Airport, JFK. We invested in offshore wind projects. And when I was there, and it's about an $860+ billion pension fund, so a large pension fund, very large pension fund, and responsible for deploying between $6 and $7 billion in capital a year to large private equity funds that were investing in these types of projects and going direct into these types of projects. And when I was there, I was put on a committee that was essentially tasked with figuring out how to rewrite the investment restrictions for the city of New York so that the bylaws, let's call them, right? Like the framework by which the city is allowed to deploy capital has to meet certain parameters. So before it was always like, okay, you can't, be in these countries because they're unsafe, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and you have to have a good cyber terrorism policy. Like it was limited to that type of stuff. And all that stuff also, by the way, has an ESG story behind it, but they wanted specific ESG mandates within those restrictions. And so I was part of that team that sort of helped develop that. And that was like a moment for me. That was like kind of a light bulb moment where it was like, wow, this is really serious stuff, because this is one of the largest pension funds in the world, and we're rewriting our investment restrictions and how we think about deploying capital that forces every dollar that goes out the door to be considering whether or not the company we're investing in has a decarb policy and has other ESG policies in place, and that they, after the investment is made, that they're actually sticking to what they say they're going to do. Because if they don't, now we have mechanisms to pull our money out. That was like a eureka moment where I was like, wow, this is wild. And then following that, Larry Fink from BlackRock came out and put all CEOs and CFOs on notice and said, hey, any company we own and we invest in, like if you don't have a decarb plan, your days are numbered. That was like another moment. Like BlackRock, one of the largest, asset managers in the world, maybe the largest private, publicly traded asset manager in the world, comes out and says this. That's big. And then we saw, I'll give you another example. So then shortly thereafter, Moody's and S&P, which are credit rating agencies for corporations, they came out and they both said that we are no longer only going to be looking at financials and when we assign a credit rating to a business. We're now actually going to integrate ESG into that outlook of that business. So this meant that the cost of capital associated with businesses they underwrote or applied a rating to would be directly correlated to how well that company ESGs. So this was like kind of a boom, boom, boom. Like, wow, this is like Illuminati stuff, right? Like this is not going away, and this is here to stay, and this is a really big movement that's happening. And so I had sort of the unique experience of being able to sit at like these different sides of the table where I sort of saw the vision. And then I went to go become head of M&A for a $50 billion publicly traded utility called PPL. I ran M&A for their renewable energy business, and just saw firsthand, right? I wrote the entire M&A playbook for that company. And it was all about going and acquiring other types of energy companies or businesses that had complementary products and services to our core renewable offerings that would enhance the return and the value to both the adopter as well as ourselves. And in that process became just so aware of how fragmented the universe is of ESG solution providers, and just how sort of like ill-equipped, like let's call it ESG professionals and companies in general were at that time to be making decisions around who do I engage when it comes to doing an ESG project, what projects am I supposed to do, what are my competitors doing, like what is any of this? So I just saw an opportunity to sort of like step in and fill that void and become like smart friend to ESG decision makers at companies that needed to become ESG compliant for a myriad of reasons. Right? Because if you think about a sustainability professional, an ESG professional, like they've never torn out a lighting ballast, they've never installed a solar panel, right? They're really good at strategy. And I don't mean to like ding ESG professionals, but they need help with vendor selection. They might need to run a bunch of projects. So if you have a bunch of projects and every single one of those projects, you have to go out and find a solar company, a waste company, a this company, a that company, right? You just can't do it. So they're completely overwhelmed with implementation. And so we're coming in and solving that problem. Yeah. And by virtue of not representing just a single provider of any single solution, we're able to, sort of be a smart friend through the process and be like, these guys are good, but these guys are even better for you. And here's why. And we'll help you through it.
That's actually really awesome to hear that. You sort of had a light bulb moment, and you, from writing the paper to then seeing those things. I think that's really telling to, people being able to spot the void in the market, because you can't have a business unless there's like a reason to be in there. You solve people's problems, basically, is what you're doing, which is something pretty interesting. But I wanted to know, because you did mention earlier that you're a risk taker, and I wanted to know that from your perspective, how big is risk taking involved in starting a business?
Oh, I think it's a great question, and I don't know if I know I can't, for me. I think it's been perhaps my best asset, but also in a sense my worst asset. Like it's good and it's bad. Like you have to be a risk taker because you have to. I think it's really, really important. Like you have to be able to go out there and fail and not be afraid to fail. You have to be able to go out there and really believe that your vision and what you're building is going to be the best product, the best solution that's ever existed on the planet. And the people you're talking to absolutely need this thing. And you're going to tell them why, right? And then that's great. Like all that is great. But then you need a team behind that. And so I would say that that part that I just articulated, like that's really important from a risk-taking standpoint. But then when it comes to having a team behind you, you almost want to be like very risk-free. You want to be very risk-averse. You want to make sure you want to be really thoughtful about who am I hiring? Who am I bringing into the tent? Because like one bad apple in an early stage business can disrupt and change the course and drastically impact whether that company's going to be successful or not. Right. And so I think you want to be a risk taker when it comes to being like going out there and finding product market fit and actually building the product itself from like an invention standpoint, right? Like if you're going to build something or design something that the world doesn't have today, you don't necessarily want to rely on things that exist in the world around you. You have to be able to take risk, intellectual risk around how you're going to create that. But then like when you think about product creation and sort of the elements behind that to bring a product to life and to find product market fit, you want to have really good people behind you. And you got to still take risks in hiring decisions and you learn through that process. I would say entrepreneurship is like, it's a continual learning process that, you know, you learn through failure. I think what it makes you, I think the biggest takeaway that I would say to anyone else is like, if you believe in something, go chase it. Yeah. Go chase it. If you think you see something and you believe that you can create something that doesn't exist and, you know, that you're passionate about, go for it, you know, and be relentless about bringing that vision to life. And don't be afraid of failure.
Yeah.
Don't compromise on the vision.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question for that. Is what are the top 3 skills or qualities every single entrepreneur should develop to succeed in today's market?
I think it's you need to be resilient and be ready for pain. You've got to be you need to be able to thrive in uncertainty.
Heard that.
And yeah, just in ambiguity. And I think the other skills, like, so I think it's like that, which is like hard, like can't really be taught, right? You either have it or you don't, and you may not know if you have it. So you do it, right? And then you're like, maybe you have it, but like, you don't know how much of it you have until like you're out there and then you're like, all right, I'm going to cry uncle, right? I think you just never give up. And, I think so resilience. I think the other skills that you should have are essentially like, I don't know if it's a bundle, a bunch of skills into this, which is like prudence. I think you need to be a risk taker, but you need to be prudent in your decisions, and how you build the business responsibly, which means taking a step back and really being thoughtful about your business plan and the people that are working for you, and making sure that every decision that you make and every hour of the day and every minute of the day of your day is there's a business case behind that, because it's really easy to get distracted when you're starting a company and essentially go on all these different side quests, you know, and it's a form of escapism, right? It's like, we'll go try this. Here's the answer. This is the answer. And you got to really stay laser focused on the business case. And only things that have a business case that are connected to revenue creation. And that is, so I think you need to be disciplined and you need to be prudent in that sense as well.
So resilient, thoughtful, and disciplined.
Yeah, I would say disciplined.
Well,
and then in terms of skills, I think like hard skills really quick is like, if you, like, I'm not a software developer, right? Like I'm really good at seeing the vision, really good at understanding what the market needs. I've created all the products that we have. But like, in order to scale that, I've had to go out and find like a really good, strong tech partner to be able to bring that vision to life. So I think going into it is really also taking stock of like what it is you want to build, like where do your superpowers lie within that vision, and like who else do you need? What other superpowers are you going to need to bring that to life? And then you're going to go hire people that maybe have the trappings of someone that scream they'll have the superpowers that that complement mine, but don't like replicate mine. You get into it with them, you'll start to really see.
It's almost like don't lack the humility and think that like one could do it all themselves. So like, let's say I go out and I am trying to fill each superpower that I need for my company to succeed. I'm not only like not being realistic, but I'm actually being harmful to myself and kind of setting myself up for failure because I'm not going out and finding the people I need to fill the areas of expertise that I just simply don't have. I can't do it all.
Right.
So that's kind of like the thoughtful part, right?
Yeah, you nailed it. And I also think it's 100%. I think the other thoughtful part is like you got to talk to your customers like all the time, and you got to really listen. And you got to be really thoughtful in taking that information, the questions that you ask them, and then how do you sort of translate the answers or the information that you've received and to like your team and whatever it is that you're building, or product solution / you're going to respond, like that you're essentially providing to that client, or so I think it's like thoughtfulness there in terms of like really keeping an open mind with what the market needs and wants.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have one verse and then I'll just hand it off to you for the rest of the show, Ellie. But a verse that came to my mind when you were talking about the resilience that one needs is 1 Peter 4:12 through 19. It says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon to test you, as though something strange were happening to you, but rejoice as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad in his glory. Be glad when his glory is revealed." So it's almost like the pain and the suffering and the resilience and the endurance, that is a way that we become more like Christ and we follow his will for us.
Yeah. That's
Love
great.
that.
Now I had a question. So did you ever have a mentor, sort of helping you throughout all this?
Yes, I've been really grateful for having wonderful mentors throughout my career that have just been really transformative in shaping my career and supportive along the way.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I'm most grateful for.
Do you recommend Gen Z or anyone who wants to get into a business to have a mentor?
Absolutely. I think a mentor is very important.
It's a matter of how you pick it. Pick your mentor.
How would you, where would you recommend finding a mentor?
That's a great question. I guess all my mentors, well, I would say when I was in college, I networked to like mentors. Like I wanted to go in investment banking. So I remember calling my parents and say, "Hey, I remember you have a friend that was like an investment banker."
Right. Yeah.
And I talked to that guy. Started, he talked to me a few times, and then you start to just level up as you get into the environment that you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really a good detail. Like, just looking for what the resources you have right now, and then sort of like trying to get closer and closer to you, what you want.
Also, to add on to that too, going out and seeing businesses that need helpers, and especially when you're young, just offer to be an intern. Offer to be an apprentice and be like an extra hand in whatever they need, and then just be like, teach me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to know, I mean, you went to college, but I've also seen, other, people who start businesses without a college degree. How do you, I mean, from coming from, college and being a college graduate, how do you think that has prepared you for, being a CEO of a company? And do you think it's necessary for going into business?
It's a good question. I know that there are people that haven't gone to college that have built very successful businesses. I think it depends. I think that if you're the, genius type, particularly kind of in the tech space, probably can get away with it. I think that it just depends. I mean, I think that if it depends on what your superpower is. I think there's people out there that are unique. And that uniqueness may not be the like super technical and I can code anything. It could be a myriad of things. Right. And I think it's also like fit, like it's something that you need to know and feel inside. But I also think that there's a lot of value to getting corporate experience, learning to work in a team, learning to understand how organizations function, and then like using some of that learning and applying it to like what you create on your own. I think a lot of what I've created also like culturally has been like a reaction to like what I haven't enjoyed or particularly liked about corporate culture. And I think there's a lot that you learn, how to write a business email, how to,
Right.
Like very kind of presentation stuff that you kind of just have to go through it and put your time in. And then like, if that makes sense, I think.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes it's not the funniest thing to learn, but it's important.
Absolutely, yeah. We're at the hour, so.
I know we are at the hour. It went by so quickly, but I just, I guess for my last question, what's your advice for Gen Z? And it could be literally anything you can think of, but yeah, what's your advice?
I would just say, I think if you do start your own business and it's a direction that you want to go, I would just say build a team with passion and bring, it will change you in ways that you would never expect if you let it. And if you put in the work and you grind it out and you always look for an opportunity. I think that like the success of like your success professionally is going to be directly correlated to like you leveling up as a person, right? In character and all these different like intangible ways, right? How do I interact with people? How do I manage people? How do I motivate people? And when you fail, there's no one else to blame but yourself. And so you look at that and you do a case study and you do like a look back and be like, where could I have gone? What can I have done better as a leader, or as a human? And I think, so when you put yourself out there in the ether and you take risks, I think it gives you the unique opportunity to identify things about yourself that you wouldn't normally identify if you just took the easier, softer way, which might be just a corporate job. Or I think everyone should get a job out of college, though, probably, unless you're like the next Mark Zuckerberg, and then start writing your business plan and formulate your ideas, and it'll come. And when when you're ready, you're ready. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
What are any of the social media platforms that people could find you and reach you at?
Yeah, so we haven't done a lot on social media, but this is a big push for us in 2025. We're starting to become more thought leaders. And if anybody would like to follow us, we're ESGxjourney.com as our website. And then it's ESGx Journey as our handle on Instagram. Please follow us. There's a lot of great TPUSA stuff on there and our take on conservative oriented things and how it applies to ESG.
Yeah.
And then also you're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn, and anyone is, feel free to reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn as well. And my name is Greg Streiff, which I think is on the screen here and also available on your website. Yes. So it's been a pleasure meeting with you guys, and an honor to be on here. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I definitely enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully, if you ever come back, you can be in our lovely studio.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to come to LA.
Yes, because I know I certainly have a lot more questions.
Yes,
but
we'll have to meet again. Yes.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg. It was wonderful having you.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Talk
Bye-bye.
soon. God bless. Bye.
There you go.